Rebecca Rushton is an entrepreneur and a current North Charleston resident who currently lives on the south end of the city. She's running now for North Charleston City Council to represent parts of that area on City Council. I talk one-on-one with Rebecca for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Rebecca Rushton, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. I know that you're a resident of North Charleston area, particularly on the south end of North Charleston. And right as we sit here right now, Ms. Rebecca, can you tell people who you are?
So my name is Rebecca Rushton. I live in the Chicora neighborhood on English Street. I've lived here for 10 years. I actually moved into the area from Mount Pleasant. And to say that it was a culture shock is an understatement. It was, at that time, I think Chicora was one of the most violent areas. It was the most violent area in North Charleston, and it was ranked close to the top of the most violent areas in the United States. We had a lot of crime. We had a lot of violence. It was a lot of gunshots, a lot of murders. But I've weathered that. I've weathered through those 10 years. We are a lot calmer now. Let me knock on wood and hope that it remains that way. I know there was some issues recently in Park Circle, and I feel for those neighbors. Unfortunately, we dealt with that for a long period of time, and it was very consistent on a consistent basis. So anyway, I live here. I'm passionate about the neighborhood. I was the president of the neighborhood association for 4 years. I worked with Palmetto Rails and the city of North Charleston, Metanoia, Lamsey, with the transfer facility, which is now the intermodal facility, which is now the ports are in charge of that. So I worked on that project. I'm always active in my community. I own multiple properties in Union Heights and Chicora, so I'm around here all day, every day, checking on my tenants, checking on what's going on, driving the streets, helping the kids. It's really funny, one of the kids in the neighborhood reminded me of this the other day. I still have it. So the word was, if you missed the school bus, I would take you to school. Because some parents didn't have a car and they couldn't get their kids to school, or they had already left for work, or some parents are like, you missed the bus, that's your punishment. Which honestly, if they miss the bus, that is not their punishment, that is their day off, and they don't need to have a day off. So they would come there were kids that had come, I'd seen the kids, knew the kids, but I didn't know them personally, and they would come knock on my door and be like, Miss Rebecca, we missed the bus. I'm like, okay, let's get in the car and let's go. And so one of the kids that I used to take to school sometimes was over visiting his grandmother, and he said, you remember when you used to take us to school? And I said, yeah. And he said, I miss that. And I said, you know what? I miss it too. And so I still do it for some of the kids in the neighborhood. We don't have as many kids on our block as we used to, but it was, you have to be there to help out your neighbors. Mm. It could be the little things or the big things.
Yes, ma'am. And so you talked about all of that, Miss Rebecca. So what got you from all of these accomplishments and actually all of those careers to now saying, hey, I want to run for North Charleston City Council's District 10 seat?
It's a long time coming. I mean, I thought about it 8 years ago, thought about it 4 years ago, and then we're having a new mayor. We have a chance for a lot of change. I feel like it's time for a change. We need to have new leadership. We're going to have new leadership in the mayor's office. We need to have new leadership at Chicora. We need to look forward, not backwards. And so I kind of felt like I'd had several people call me and suggest that this was maybe the time and I should do it. I mean, they had suggested before. And so I thought, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to do it. I mean, vote for Rebecca. That's what I'm, so that's what I decided to do.
What is the biggest difference from the time that you moved into the Chicora Cherokee area to right now?
It's a drastic difference. Crime, violent crime, murders are definitely down. We have had some influx of homeowners. That's huge. Mm-hmm. We have had some abandoned property. I mean, we had a large amount of abandoned properties in Chicora. There's a large amount. It was a struggle, I think, but prices are getting to be more expensive, so people are looking to sell their abandoned property. And so those have changed hands and usually into people who are owners, occupied, which I think is a huge catalyst. Some of my neighbors have changed. A lot of my neighbors are still the same, which I really like. I mean, I moved here and I stayed here because of my neighborhood. I mean, we have a good, tight little street. We've added some new faces to our street. But I think that was the other biggest thing of another reason of running is that I want to see my neighbors stay the same. You know, I don't want an influx of people coming from other areas and displacing my neighbors. And I know that's a difficult challenge. It's a difficult thing to say. You know, how do you do that? I mean, that's been a struggle all along. There are people, I own some properties in the neighborhood. So, I mean, I constantly have people knocking on my door, Miss Rebecca, you know, looking for an apartment, or my kid's looking for an apartment, or I have a neighbor around the corner, her son's looking for something that's affordable. I don't have enough to maintain that, you know? So it's a huge struggle. It's a huge struggle. So I hopefully, you know, like I said, I love the crime being down. I love those kind of issues. But I do like that my neighbors, especially my elderly neighbors, can feel a little bit more safe and secure. We've had some instances that were, you know, I'd had an elderly neighbor with someone drove by shooting and she fell to the ground on her porch, and I'm running to her house, you know, and it's a funny story, but I almost jump on top of her, and she started laughing at me, and she said, well, you don't weigh enough that you could keep that bullet off of me. And so we would, you know, we're laying on the ground laughing at this awful situation. And I'm just happy that we're not dealing with that on the consistent basis that we've been dealing with before. So I hope I answered your question and didn't go into a tangent.
Oh, no worries. That brings me to my next question, Ms. Rebecca. So how much has crime gone down in your neighborhood in the past 2 years?
I don't have the actual statistical numbers, but in speaking with my neighbors, it's huge. I mean, literally, we were calling the police for gunshots probably 5 times a week. I was calling for someone who I felt had been murdered once a month. I mean, that's a lot. And now, once again, let me knock on wood again. I don't know where that came from, but I hope that works. You know, my neighbor and I were just talking about it the other day. She's like, oh, we haven't had to call the police in a while. I mean, we haven't had to call the police for gunshots in 6 months. Wow. So that's a huge difference.
Yes, ma'am.
As opposed to probably 3 years ago where it was at least once a week.
So where exactly is the police presence right now in District 10?
That's a really good question. You know, we do have a lack of officers. We've had a lack of officers. That's a huge issue. It's been an issue. I believe the city of North Charleston, you know, when I was the president of the Neighborhood Association, they were saying how they had upped the starting salaries for police officers. I know a large majority of police officers left. I had a lot of contacts with being the president of the Neighborhood Association, and probably out of my contacts, it's dwindled down to 2. That's a huge amount of officers who are gone. And so I believe it's like a 50% or 60% are brand new officers. We don't have enough officers, but you know what? Honestly, it's more than just the officers. It's more than just the police. It's having support for parents, having support for kids, having a better education system, having access to healthy food. I mean, those are the catalysts that lead to poverty, which then in turn lead to crime. Ooh. You know, I mean, it's a bigger issue than just having more police. We can have all the police in the world sitting around, but that doesn't necessarily stop all the crime. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, ma'am. Well, then let me ask you this: what exactly is the poverty index right now in your district?
I think we are at so when I moved in, it was $18,000 a year was the general. I think now it's gone up to $25,000 a year for the majority of people in my neighborhood in Chicora. Now, Chicora and Union Heights are vast different than Park Circle.
Sure.
I mean, I've knocked on the doors of Park Circle. I have friends that live in Park Circle. I hang out in Park Circle, and I also hang out in Chicora. So, I mean, we're talking going from $100,000 to $200,000 house to a $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $100,000 house. So our demographic is huge and vastly different. And that into brings a huge issue. I mean, you have to be able to associate yourself and be able to handle the problems of people who are living on $20,000 a year, which is below poverty level, which is how do people live on that? I don't know. And deal with people who are living between 80 and 100, maybe 60 to $100,000 in Park Circle. And I'm sure there's some people in Park Circle that don't make that, but that's the upper echelon of Park Circle. And then the lower echelon, obviously, of Chicora is in the 20s, and 18. And that's a lot. That's a huge spread in the demographic.
Yeah, and I know to tell the viewers, obviously parts of Park Circle and Union Heights and Chicora, Cherokee are part of your district. But let me ask you then, what exactly is the biggest demographic in your district? Meaning, we have it's largely African American. And then, like I said, I guess I don't have the numbers to compare what our new district is now. Everything's kind of just coming in and coming together. So, it was a little bit of a muster getting the actual registered voters. So having all that other information, it's going to take a little bit of time. Sure. But the demographic is majority African American in my neighborhood in Chicora, not so much in the Park Circle. So I believe, I don't know the Park Circle, because I know District 8, but District 8 got split in half. So I'd have to cut half of District 8, and I don't know the answer to that question. So yeah, that's the majority of my neighborhood. And also too, like I said, the same thing, we have the socioeconomic level is completely different from one end of this district to the other. Where do you see those levels heading in the next 5 years with all this growth? You can say the word if you want to, but it's coming. It's coming here. We're going to get a displacement. That's my biggest concern about my neighborhood is the displacement. Park Circle, a lot is owner occupied. There are some rentals, a lot of owner occupied, which is good. And then you don't have as many people being displaced unless they want to get out or they want to move. Chicora, we don't have that. Union Heights is getting an influx of owner occupieds because they're doing a lot of development with single family homes. Chicora, we just don't have that. A large majority of Chicora is rental. Honestly, I would say off the top of my head and not knowing the exact numbers, I did have a list of the owner occupieds at one point when I was working with the intermodal facility, because we were moving those houses and launching the houses. So I knew a lot of that back then. I'm sure some of that has changed. It was a very small number, like a 15-18%. Hopefully it's gone up from there. And then we did lose some of those because we lost some of those structures on the other side of Sproul. Right. In rents, I think a couple of issues with rents is we need to have a better program to keep our elderly in place. There are people who have rented in this neighborhood forever, multiple years, almost their whole lives. And I've spoken to a lot of them, and they're like, oh, well, I pay my rent. And I'm like, yes, you pay your rent now. But in 5 years from now, you're not going to be able to afford that rent. We need to be able to have you in the system, either if we work with North Charleston Housing Authority, which I've spoken with them several different times prior to this, and working a program to keep people who are renters, who are elderly in Chicora, so they are not displaced and moved to a neighborhood that they've never been to before, that they are not familiar with. I think also too, the owners who live, the owner occupieds in this neighborhood, they need to be supported. They need to make sure that they have, multiple people have said this, I'm not the first person, but they have repairs in their homes. They need to be able to get those repairs done in a good budget friendly way. They need to be able to stay in their home and not be displaced and moved out. And then if their children want to come and move in their home, then the home should be available for their family so they can continue to be able to stay in the neighborhood. And I think that's hugely important. We have several elderly neighbors that live in the neighborhood who, one, for example, that lives right directly behind me, her hot water heater goes out every time it rains because it floods behind all of our houses. So if it rains, I go over there, or another gentleman who I'm friends with, who's a property manager, goes over there and checks to make sure she has hot water and she's not boiling water to take a bath at 99 years old. Those are the kind of things that we're going to have to do as a community, number one. Then obviously as a council, I can't go to everyone's house, but
we're all neighbors. We all support each other. So if I know to call someone to help this person, get some help, their hot water heater started, or help with rot underneath their kitchen sink, or if they have a leak so that they are able to stay in their home, then we need to make sure that we facilitate those things.
How many people in your District 10, actually rent right currently?
I think we're already, well, like I said, I mean, I can tell you the Chicora and the Chicora area. I mean, Park Circle has I believe it's around 60 to 75% are renters. Mm-hmm. We also, like I said, we had a lot of abandoned homes. A lot of those are getting fixed up. I mean, we had a lot of abandoned properties.
Wow! And how many abandoned properties do you currently have
in our neighborhood? Oh gosh. I mean, honestly, there's one on every street. Mm. There's close to one abandoned property on every street.
Wow. And what is the typical median price for a home in your district?
So in Union Heights, it's in the 200s, in the 300s. In Chicora, it's about the same. We have a couple houses on the market. That's the other thing. We don't have a huge amount of properties on the market. A large majority of the properties are owned by selective groups that, have sold those bulks of properties to other investors and so on and so forth. Right. And then, Park Circle, I mean, we're talking 4 to 8. I think there's a couple properties that are $1 million. That's a huge difference.
Yes, ma'am. How many people in your district actually own a home?
I don't have that number off the top of my head. Like I said, in Chicora, I think we're maybe 15, 18%. And I believe it's a larger percentage in the Park Circle section.
Wow. So what's more important for the district, Ms. Rebecca? Is it building new homes and commercial space, or actually rehabbing, expanding, and better utilizing those existing homes?
I think it's a little of both. I mean, we're going to have to do both. We also have some vacant lots in this neighborhood. We have vacant lots in Union Heights that are going to be obviously developed. I mean, they're already working in that direction. We need to start thinking outside the box. I think, it would be nice to do. We have the Low Country Rapid Transit coming, so we have to think about the rezoning with that. We have to do some more mixed use development. I think some mixed use development maybe down Sproul. We also need to look into having housing that's affordable for people who are working in the neighborhood, working in the area, working downtown. We have a lot of people that live in Chicora, particularly, that work in the hotels downtown or work in restaurants downtown. I actually have a couple tenants that work in restaurants, one downtown and one Mount Pleasant. They're at well below. I charge them well below market rent. But I mean, they wouldn't be able to work in Mount Pleasant or work downtown if they lived all the way up in Latson or Somerville, because most of them don't have a vehicle. So how are you going to get to work? And then again, how are you going to have the businesses that are going to thrive if they don't have employees, and then they have to have someplace to live? So in order to do that, we've got to think outside the box, I think. We do have to think about some apartment developments. I really believe that we shouldn't cluster people. I don't believe we should just cluster affordable housing and cluster workforce housing. I think it needs to be kind of intermingled in mid-level housing. I think, to me, that seems to be, when you look at the statistics, what works best for everybody. So, it is part of the city to kind of make sure that the developers and people who are doing the development provide those kind of housing along with what they're already going to provide for mid and upper level, housing. I mean, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no worries. I was just thinking of this. Where exactly is density in your district?
Where is the density?
Yes, ma'am.
So we have some apartments. We have several apartments that are on the other side of Reynolds. We have a large majority of single family homes that go from Reynolds to Clement. And I definitely don't want to see the single family homes removed from the neighborhood. And I would never think of taking a street and mow it down and putting townhouses. Absolutely not. The reason why I moved into this neighborhood because I love the 1940s cottage. I am a rehabber all the way through. I salvage, so obviously I love an old building. I love an old house, but we do have some spots that are going to be near the rapid transit,
Right.
and maybe at the end of Reynolds Avenue that can be used for more density. And like I said, on Sproul,
Yes.
I know that they've talked about that several times. There have been several different parcels that have come available, and there have been discussions about development and maybe doing the work live, on a couple spots, which would also be nice. It'd be nice to bring small businesses. It'd be nice to bring, the miracle is the grocery store, so it'd be nice to bring something like that. But even if we don't have a full-fledged grocery store, we need to have some smaller bodegas. We need to have people that are, we need to have more access to farmers markets. We need to have more access to healthy food. We need to have access to, not having to go to the Dollar General or take the bus downtown. Or there is, save a lot. But
Yes, ma'am. Exactly right. For those people up there by Rivers and Durant Avenue. But let me ask you this. With those vacant lots, where exactly could you build workforce housing and affordable housing?
so the vacant lots that we have in Chicora are usually smaller single family lots. I know there is some development going on in them now. But like I said, there is some property up near the old Navy base where the city owns.
Right.
It'd be nice to have some affordable housing there. And also too, like I said, we could do some partnering. There needs to be workforce, affordable, and moderate, mid-income housing. And I believe that it should be all mixed in together. The studies show time and time again that if you segregate neighborhoods by the income, it doesn't make a healthy neighborhood. A healthy neighborhood is to have diversity of all classes and all races, and it makes for a better, more diverse, and economically growing neighborhood. I believe that to be better people, humans, we need to be able to have ourselves immersed in some diversity. And if we're just sitting there in our $700,000 house and we're not interacting with someone who's perhaps living in the $100,000 house, then I don't think we're getting a true view of what the world is really like.
What is the real view of District 10 in your mind?
My view of District 10 is obviously safe,
Yes, ma'am.
affordable, diverse, local neighborhood.
Mm.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, you go for it. I'm sorry.
So I just, like I said, I've lived here for 10 years.
Yes, ma'am.
I moved from Mount Pleasant, predominantly, obviously white. It was an upper middle class neighborhood that we lived in. I came to Chicora and I thrived. I loved it. I loved my neighbors. I'm very connected to my neighbors. I enjoy being here. It's no matter what happens, people are going to come. This area is Chicora is in the middle, Union Heights, Dorchester Terrace. We are in the middle of everything. I was just one of the first people that got here. Right. And I basically said this in our meetings all along. We should have been making a plan to help keep the neighborhood as diverse as possible 10 years ago. This was coming. It's been coming. We're too close to Park Circle and the activity. It's too close to downtown. Park Circle has gotten a great revitalization. They've gotten some apartments. They're getting lots of businesses. It is a hub, lots of restaurants, lots of things going on up down there. And we also have Riverfront Park, where we have multiple people coming into these neighborhoods, into this area to go to these events. And they're coming from all over the world. Literally, they're people that are, they're coming in from other countries to come to these events that are happening in North Charleston.
And that's what I wanted to ask you about, Miss Rebecca. How can you actually revitalize District 10 without displacing some of these people?
I don't think we have to displace people to revitalize. We just need to give support to people who already live here to revitalize. Revitalization isn't making everything brand new and getting rid of what's old. Revitalization is bringing in, you know, a positive economy into, I guess, a depressed area. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I have multiple people who live here. I also have some other, some friends that own other properties here, and a majority of them are African American. And did I lose you?
Oh no, I'm still here.
Okay, so I just lost myself, I guess.
Oh, no worries. I can see and hear you.
I mean, you know, my phone is going all day long. I'm kind of like,
I'm gonna wrap this up. I know.
trying to keep it on the level.
Yes,
you know,
ma'am.
and we always joke and laugh. My friend and I, Desiree, joke and laugh, and like, she's like, "Girl, when are we going to be able to ride our bike to the coffee shop?" You know, and it's still the same neighbors. We just want the amenities that everyone else has, and so I don't. Is it going to be difficult? Yes, Quintin. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be unbelievably difficult because keeping the people in the neighborhood has like been one of my fights. And how are we going to do that? I mean, there's going to have to be some incentives to property owners. I mean, you have to have an incentive to make people do the right thing. I wish everybody did the right thing just because, but they don't necessarily do that. So we have to give some incentives for people to rent to do a lower income rental? Yes, absolutely. We're going to have to give some tax incentives. We're going to have to give some other incentives, you know, to make sure that we can keep people that are left in our neighborhood. I mean, that's just the bottom line.
So what is the current tax base for District 10?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, what is the current tax base for District 10?
Like I said, we're combined with the new district. So I like all the information that I want to get. I only have partial information, so I don't really want to spew out numbers.
Sure.
Not taking into account the other portion of Park Circle as well. So I mean, we're the new game.
Yes,
that's
ma'am.
the problem with this district right now is that we're not, and I am concentrating on Chicora because that's where I live.
Yes, ma'am.
That is not the concentration of this district. It is sprawled from one side of the south end to the other.
Right.
And also encompassing, you know, the old Navy base, which is a whole new bag of tricks in and of itself. So, I mean, you know, we have to take that into consideration when we're thinking about all of our base. And hopefully, you know, I know there's a lot of really cool. I'm pretty excited about the cool development that's going on in the Navy base. But one of the biggest things that I think is most important is that everyone on this side, from Park Circle to Chicora to Union Heights, and obviously, you know, Dorchester Terrace is going to be a little bit difficult because they're over there in their little pocket. But we all need to be able to have access to those amenities coming to the Navy base. We all need to be able to have access to Riverfront Park. We all need to be able to have access to the shops and the restaurants and the facilities. And we need to be able to bike to those facilities, and we need to be able to walk to those facilities. And having lived, and I hear complaints from people in Park Circle right now, they'll have events over at Riverfront Park, and they can't get there from the brand new multi-million-dollar bridge that was built, you know? We're sitting down here in Chicora, time and time again, we would ride with the kids on bikes up to Riverfront Park.
Right.
Getting there was insane. It was a nightmare. I mean, it would literally be, sometimes I would take some of the kids in the car because they were too young and we were afraid of them crossing the road.
Right.
And then having to go through the dirt through the backside of Reynolds Avenue to get up to Waterfront Park. Like, I know there are some things coming. I know there's a pedestrian bridge, but we need to make sure all of those things, and working with the DOT and the state of South Carolina, make sure that is seamlessly accessible for everyone in District 10.
So how many infrastructure projects are currently in the works for your district?
There's a lot. So we have an infrastructure project right now going on in the tank farm. So we have, this is kind of why I started running for city council, but there's a senior center that's being built.
Right.
There's a community center that's supposed to be built. There is a baseball field that's going to go over there. So that's a thorn in my side right now. Then we have all the multiple projects that are going on in the Old Navy base. So I think a lot of, and there are the parcels that are owned by the city of North Charleston that are to be developed. I know a large majority of the projects that are on the old Navy base were things that were owned by Palmetto Rail,
Right.
and so they have been sold.
Right.
Like I said, we worked with them, and I still talk to them frequently about different issues. So those are big infrastructure projects. We just got the on ramp. We just got the corner road. So supposedly there's some flooding and drainage issues happening near Corner. I haven't gotten the whole logistics on that yet, but there's a lot of infrastructure projects going on in our neighborhood, in our district.
In your district, and how has the city developed, adopted, and actually implemented a drainage master plan in coordination with adjacent jurisdictions, I should say?
So it is my understanding that they are now working on that plan. I feel like the whole South End needs the plan immediately. We have rapid flooding. These neighborhoods were developed in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. They weren't thinking about what we're thinking about today. So the infrastructure that's put in place, or lack of, there's a lot of lack of infrastructure. There are drains that drain from one street through multiple yards into a drainage ditch or into a drainage catch basin.
Yes,
they go who knows where. And some of the stuff, and honestly, I've had them come out and look in my yard. I have several different spots where water will come up and no one can tell me why. We have multiple neighbors who have the same thing. So we need a full drainage plan done for the southern end, including Park Circle. And then we need to have a plan moving forward because you know what? Water's coming. It's not going away. We're getting more floods. We're getting more rain. And, we need to be able to handle that pretty much now. And we also don't need the people that are in the most depressed socioeconomic area to hold the burden for, you know what I mean?
Yes,
This
ma'am.
whole North Charleston. We also need, we invest, even though we don't invest in as much in our homes, we also need to be given the same amount of, respect and the same amount of infrastructure and the same amount of support that everyone else does, even in the new developments and new builds.
And let me ask you this, Dan. Where would a pump station be ideal for your district?
I think a pump station possibly. We have Quintin's Marsh, which we have to do a whole configuration on that. We have a bit, and that's the other thing with. I have spoken to the mayor's office a couple times about Corner and the flooding. The flooding has been like that for years. Huge flooding right here at Redwood and Chicora. It's massive. So I would think around the tank farm would be probably a good place for a pump station, or they should think about a pump station. We have a lot of water flowing in these two areas that need to be, dealt with. And also too, the maintenance of the drain system, making sure they're not clogged, making sure, a lot of this stuff is flowing through the Navy base.
Yes.
So we have to make sure that when it's going there, it's not being stopped for lack of their, due diligence on their side.
And that's my next question. How many drainages needs to be cleaned out right now in your area?
So I think we're pretty, in our particular area, I think we're pretty good. Okay. The trucks are here frequently. We haven't really had that much of and I hope I'm not jinxing myself, but we haven't had any bad storms with the really awful flooding here in a little bit. But also too, I think they've done a good job on the other side, Sproul and Iris and Baxter. Oh, yes. A large majority of those drains were completely clogged with bicycles and car bars. I don't even know what else. And they've cleaned that out. Wow. I think that's helped tremendously. Just a couple of the issues are there. It's not really the drainage. It's just the water has nowhere to go. So you could clean they clean the drains out all day at the corner of at the corner of Redwood. There's no way for the water to go. So it doesn't really matter how much you clean it out if the water's not going anywhere.
Right. And I will hope to talk to you more about that in the next interview I hope to do with you. But let me ask you, where else will development happen in your particular neighborhood?
I think in my particular neighborhood, we'll see. I think development's going to happen with vacant lots. I think development's going to happen on rentals. I think we have a lot of positivity going in that direction. We have a lot of positivity going on Sproul. I think there would be development there. Reynolds is a hot spot. It's the next, it's the next Montague. It's coming. We just need to, Montague and Park Circle is very cool and eclectic. It draws a lot of people. A lot of people want to go there. A lot of people enjoy it. People who live there love it. We just want to make sure that we kind of bring that same vibe to Reynolds. We want to keep it local. We want to keep it community oriented, and we want to keep everything safe. And I think that's the two biggest or the three biggest things kind of going forward. Like I said, it's a tricky situation now that we have Park Circle in the mix.
Right.
But we have to keep our eye on the big picture. We have to keep our eye on where we're trying to go and what we're trying to do. And the bottom line is we need to keep it local. We need to keep it safe. We need to keep a livability, and hopefully we'll continue in that direction.
Rebecca Rushton, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome to Close-Ups.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Have a good day.
Likewise.